All right, welcome to AV's Black Coffee Show, the inaugural first edition. And I have to thank my bro, Joe Williams, for hosting it this very first one. Very thankful for that. So, basically, I hate that. So here, let me just touch on this. Touch on this.
Okay.
I hate using the word basically because I use basically all the time. Basically. So I could trim that out ever again. I'm going to get rid of that.
All right.
Here is the Black Coffee Show. I'm your host, Eric Van, DJ AV, Eric Williams. And the whole idea of this show is just to have some sandbox moments, different topics, different discussion, native perspective on things. You know, it's something that I don't see a lot of our people do. So this is something that I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. The first one's going to be a Halloween special. Now, back in the day, I used to radio host at a radio station, KSWS and KXSW. And every year I'd host a radio show with a Halloween theme. Now, this is about 4 to 6 hours of Halloween music, scary stories, something that I love. And this year, you know, it's not going to be as long. You know, this is going to be maybe a 15-minute segment. But we're going to discuss a couple of things. And one of them is going to be our favorite things about this time of year. From native perspective and from your own perspective. Whatever. You know, just kind of a sandbox a thing. So, Joe, thank you for being my first guest. It's an honor, privilege, and thank you for kicking me in the ass to get this thing going. So.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy you're back on the microphone. It's been so long. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's open mic. I mean, you can talk, you can swear, you can curse, you can speak in Swahili. I don't care. Do what you want to do. Just, you know, it's an open mic show. But
cool.
So what we're talking about this time is our favorite Halloween stuff, our favorite spooky stuff. The first thing I want to ask you, just off the top of your head, the spookiest moment you've ever experienced. Top of your head, go.
Well, here's the problem, is I grew up on a house on the res. And you know the house I grew up in.
Yes.
There are family members that would not go back to the house.
Oh, I have a story for that in a moment. So,
okay,
yeah.
Okay. On both sides of my family, though, you know, on my mom's side, there were family members that came down, and they would say things like, they're like, I had the weirdest dream last night that there were these small little people in our room. And then on the flip side, my grandmother, our grandmother, she stayed down there, and she came out and she shook her head and she said, the Chiontinos came in last night. Yeah. And for those who aren't Dakota or familiar with the word, Chiontina is small people, little people. And so, you know, it's like you have different people from different world backgrounds seeing the same thing. And it wasn't just those two, it was multiple people.
Yeah.
And specifically the pink room, we called it the pink room.
The pink room.
And but that's not even
doesn't even scratch the surface.
That's
really
the introduction to what happened in that house.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, I think as I sit here and think about it right now, the scariest thing that ever happened to me was when I lived in Moorhead, Minnesota. And we had this house, and from the onset, so when we moved in, my wife got deployed. She's in the military and she deployed, and she was gone. And I was by myself, and I remember like the first nights I could smell
that's
like
right,
pipe smoke, like old cherry tobacco or old like white, you know, so like we're Dakota. So when we say tobacco, sometimes we think of like ceremonial and all that stuff. That's not this. This is sort of like the 20th century,
commercial tobacco, you know, commercial tobacco. Like a pipe, you know,
yeah, from like a corncob pipe,
old man pipe, old man pipe.
Yeah. And very, very pleasant scent. You know, it was very aromatic. But I smelled it and I was like, well, what's that? You know, it's like, it's an old building. You know, we have a lot of wood in here. When it heats up, it releases out of the wood there. But I was like, that's really specifically, you know, it's a real specific smell. So I went outside, checking out to see if anyone was around the house, and there was nothing. There's an old gentleman that lived next door. He wasn't outside. And I thought, okay, that's weird. And that happened a couple times. And I told you about that. And I was like, you got to come check this out. Well, one morning, it had just snowed. and I was preparing to renovate the kitchen because my wife was coming home.
Yep.
And I wanted to surprise her with an updated kitchen. And so I bought the stuff. I started to tear things down. And this morning it had snowed out, just a fresh powdering, maybe not even half an inch of snow.
Yep.
And I go outside to let my dogs out. And I noticed that there was these footsteps from the street coming down the sidewalk.
That's right.
And I mean, it wasn't happening; it was already done. But these footsteps came right up to the edge of the property, and the steps. This person stepped onto the grass, at the corner of the grass facing the house, and that's where the tracks stopped.
Yep.
And I looked at that, and I thought, well, that's weird. Who would walk up to the house and then walk backwards with their tracks
right
all the way back out to the street? And I followed the tracks out to the street, and of course the tracks were gone because of all the cars that had driven through there. The fact is, though, is that the tracks weren't back. I mean, maybe they did. I didn't see it happen. But distinctly, these were some old-time loafer type of shoes. I mean, these weren't like these bulky tennis shoes or boots.
So it had like a skinny looking shoe.
And this distinct heel.
Oof.
Well, I thought that was weird.
Well, I remember you telling me about this at the time. Like, man, something weird happened. You know, I'm smelling stuff in the house. I go outside.
And it gets weirder.
Ooh, okay. And I'm thinking, okay. Well, we're a couple of guys that have gone through a lot of weird stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go. So
I start renovating, and I pull out the cupboards. I pull things out of the wall, and I found a diamond ring in the wall there. I thought, well, that's weird. Okay, that's sad that someone left a ring. You know, and the place, I think it had been renovated in the 70s, and so that ring had probably been there at that point by 30, 40 years. Things start coming off. I'm sort of this is before I called you and Brian to come and help me out here.
That's right. Yeah,
because I was having issues with the countertop there, and I got everything pulled out. Well, that first night, so the way the house was is that there was a front door and a side door.
Yep.
I slept up on the second floor, and I had two dogs at the time, two Jack Russells that were on the first floor, and at nighttime they would sleep in a kennel. And I lay down, and all of a sudden I heard what sounded like a door slam shut. Like someone just took a door and just slammed it shut. And I thought, oh geez, someone's
breaking in
the
or
house.
something.
Yeah. So I grabbed my pistol, went downstairs, walked through the first floor there into the kitchen, the dining room, kitchen, back to the living room. There's no one in there. I thought, oh, great. Let me check downstairs. I go down to the basement. No one's in the basement. Come back up, double check the doors. Everything's tight. Yeah. Everything's locked up tight. And then it dawned on me that with the exception of the two external doors, there are no doors inside the house.
Yeah.
Minus the bathroom door upstairs, right next to my bedroom, and our bedroom door.
Yeah.
Those were the only two internal doors in the house.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe there was a door in the bedroom next door, but that slam came from downstairs.
Wow.
So I thought, well, okay, who knows? Maybe something banged up against the house. Could be. So I lay back down, kind of relax myself. All of a sudden, wham, happened again. And I thought, well, wait a minute here. Okay. So I get up to go back downstairs. Wham, wham. All of a sudden, there's all these things happening. And I stop, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm listening. And then it sounds like someone's pushing furniture around the living room.
Wow.
And then I heard something tumble, like someone flipped a couch or something, or flipped a chair. It was big furniture sounds. Yeah. And it was hitting the wall so hard that the bedroom wall was shaking. I had a couple paintings up there.
Wow.
And the frames rattling. And I was like, what is happening? And so again, I muster up the courage, because it only lasted probably 30 seconds, right? Okay. Just long enough for me to sort of muster my courage to climb out of my bed to investigate.
Yeah.
And I go downstairs, prepare to see a living room completely destroyed, and there's nothing.
Wow.
And I thought, well, what is going on? I thought, okay, listen, this is nonsense. I'm going to go to bed. The dogs are quiet. The dogs weren't even freaking out. So it was really questioning my perspective of what was happening.
Yeah.
And I go upstairs, I lay back down, and then I hear steps coming up the stairs.
Mm-mm.
And we had hardwood floors.
So you can really hear a creak. You can hear like a squeak.
Yep. You hear, I mean, this is, at this point, this is 80-year-old steps, 90-year-old steps.
Yeah.
And so you hear the creaking of the boards. But then you hear the click-clack.
Yep.
Click-clack.
Of a loafer.
Of a
type
loafer shoe. And I remember just like pulling my sheets out. I mean, I'm a 30-something-year-old man at this point, and I am not prepared for whatever this is.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, my wife is overseas. I'm by myself in this house. I'm like, if I call anybody, if I tell anybody the story, they're going to assume I'm probably drinking or something, or that I'm just crazy.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, there's only one person I can call that's going to probably believe me.
Yeah.
And so I pick up my phone and I call you.
Yep.
And I'm like, Eric, you're not going to believe me.
I remember this. Yeah.
But there's something happening here. And I could hear the steps come into my bedroom. And I heard the loafer sounds walking across the floor around the bed.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was on the phone with you. And I said, do you hear the footsteps?
Yeah. No, totally. Totally remember it. And
Yeah.
it was like, what the hell is going on? So I'm actually debating if I should get in the car and like drive up. I don't remember what time it was. It was late or whatever.
It was like 11:30.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible. In those days I used to go out a lot at that time, and I'm like, should I drive up there and like check on him or what the hell, And I'm like, So yeah, wow.
The thing is it was anticlimactic because that was it.
That was it.
It was done.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and there's been other things on a house, and there's a couple things that Sis and I are not going to share with anybody.
Yeah.
And the other stuff is sort of the common, like, what, that was weird stuff.
Yep.
But I am tempted to go back to that house and talk to the people that live there now and just be like, hey, so is anything going on?
Right.
Yeah.
The thing that spooked me about that place was, excuse me, you had an office that was kind of odd, didn't have a lot of light in it. The basement always had this just foreboding feeling. Whenever I look down there, I'm like, am I going to see a pair of eyes? Am I going to see somebody walking up the stairs like a spider? What really hit me is when your pooch, when poor Einstein got hit by a car.
Oh, yeah.
It was such a dramatic and just, oh my goodness, you could just feel the energy because this poor guy his poor dog got hit. He was okay. He's a little scratched up.
Yep.
But it was just like, man, what kind of bad luck is this? Can you have at this kind of place?
Mm-hmm.
I liked the home. The home was nice, but no, it was definitely had
there was a vibe.
Eerie. There was a vibe. There was definitely an eerie feeling at that place, and that's kind of followed us around. In our family, we've had a lot of these weird experiences. We've had some cultural things happen. Me and my dad, we saw, the little people. I mean, we saw them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you see them, they can bring you bad luck. It can bring you things. Did see it. So. Okay, perfect. Had to take a pause break there. No, I mean, just the spookiest things you can think of. That's what this episode's about, and that's perfect because that just sums up some of the weird stuff we've gone through. We've gone through a lot of weird things together, mind you. I was thinking about the scariest movie recently. I started doing them on my Facebook page. The scariest movie you've ever seen. Go.
So on my podcast, I just talked about this to one of our guests, Matt Barse. And he's a filmmaker in Oklahoma, from Siston.
From Siston.
Yeah. So the story, short answer, scariest moment of watching a movie was Exorcist 3, where nurse walks by the hallway and all of a sudden the Grim Reaper's right behind her. And the way the jump cut and all that. And this was filmed in, I think, 90 or something like that. Terrifying. However, we watched the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, oof.
I saw it in Minneapolis with Tom Horgan and his family. And I remember at the end of that, we just looked at each other and we're like, whoa. Like, we were just shocked.
Well, yeah. Is that how it ends, And
yeah. Well, we go back to his place that night and we're all sort of like amped up, and his, I think his stepsister was there and we were like, we gotta keep this going, and we're all talking. And we discovered that, at least myself, but I think him too, although he's like a movie versatile. I had not seen The Shining yet.
Oh, at that time?
At that time.
Oh, wow.
This is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 20 plus years ago. And so we watched The Shining. I did not think I could see a scarier movie than The Blair Witch Project.
Shining is...
hands down terrifying.
It's terrifying in so many ways because you don't know what direction is up. And I'll get to my scariest movie in a second. But it's like, when you go crazy, is that what you're going to see? So is the guy really crazy? Or is he seeing ghosts? Or did his family go crazy with him and they're all experiencing crazy? Or are they all seeing ghosts? And that's I think that's the hard part.
I think that's the perfect layout of scary experiences, where you go through something, you experience something, and then you're left, because I would say probably 99% of the cases when you experience something, then everything goes back to normal.
Yeah, you question your reality.
And you're like, well, what the heck was that? But the other weird part is that when people go through stuff, when they experience something, literally they just sort of go back to normal like that instant, like, well, that was weird. Back to the dishes.
Yep.
And you don't even talk about it, or you don't think about it.
That is so perfect. I don't mean to cut you off in that regard, because we're talking about your place, your home where you grew up, your dad's place. Where Mom was mentioning this last night. We were talking about the Dakota word wanagi jichi, spooks, and how one of our aunts wouldn't go back there. Yep. She refused. Yep. She saw something with my mom. They're sitting at the table, and things just started happening in front of her. And she's like, "Joe, this is my Uncle Joe, or Joe's dad. I gotta go." And she left and never basically came back. Yep. These things happen in front of these people. Yep. And how do you process that? I'm thinking of the scariest movie. For me, is Jacob's Ladder. Came out in 1990. It's Tim Robbins. And it is the absolute questioning of your own sanity.
Still haven't seen it. And
I can't give away the ending. But you take The Shining times 10. And you really, and this is tough because, it'd be really hard for veterans to watch, but it also could give them some perspective on things that happen to them. It is a brilliant movie. I think it's probably the most underrated. It's not a horror movie where there's,
it's like a psychological thriller.
It is beyond psychological. Adrian Lin directed it. He did 9.5 Weeks. He did, did he do Blue Velvet? I can't remember. He might have did Blue Velvet. He did a bunch of these. He was like one of the avant-garde directors of the 80s and 90s, and he did some really awesome stuff. And I think his peak work, a lot of people talk about it now. There's a number of other YouTubers who have put it out there with Jacob's Ladder. I seen it when I was 10 years old.
I think Blue Velvet was David Lynch.
Is that Lynch? Okay, so they're both of the same family of guys, like the directors that have that same kind of surrealism.
Type of...
I know it's almost like The Lost Highway. It's another really strange movie.
Oh yeah.
But it just makes you question, like, is this guy going through all these horrifying things? Is he, or is he going crazy? So, not giving any spoilers away. See it, rent it, stream it, whatever you got to do. Yeah. Go to your local Blockbuster, which don't exist anymore, and find this movie. I'm not plugging nothing here. Just you want to get a mental freak out. I don't care what comes out. Nothing has ever topped that movie for me, and it's only because is this what it's like? And that's what I question. Is this what it's like? Because we go back to that. We go back to being normal. We go back to being oh well, yeah, we'll do the dishes, or we'll walk the dog.
And that's something that people report all the time when they talk about when something happens. It's like flipping a light switch. You turn the light on, something's happening. What is that? Is the world changing? The thing goes away or the thing stops. Flip the switch, and then it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. It's like the Matrix goes back to normal again.
It's not the new normal. It's the normal is what our five senses can feel, but the reality is it's that veil. And we talked about this on your podcast, Five Plain Questions. Please check that podcast out. They're awesome. There's a veil, and sometimes that veil gets pulled back just enough, and you can feel or sense or see or even hear or even taste or smell it.
Sometimes you can see through it.
You can see through it, and that's the spookiest part. Spookiest song you ever heard? Go. Tough one. I'm putting you on the spot, but just a song that just like, ooh, that's kind of weird, or that kind of gives you the willies, or just unusual. I got one for you when you're ready, but
Give me a second. Go for it.
Okay, so the spookiest song I've ever heard, and to this day, it's played perfectly in David Fincher's Zodiac. It starts the movie and it ends the movie. It's Hurdy-Gurdy Man by Donovan.
Oh,
that is a creepy song. Only because you never know what the Hurdy-Gurdy Man is. I've always looked at it as is he the Grim Reaper? Is he the personification of death? You look at the lyrics of the song, and it's just such a strange song. The way it begins and ends, and the way he uses it in the film Zodiac to begin the movie and end the movie. Perfect coda. Perfect. Just, oh, yeah. You question, like, oh, what's this about, you know?
So when they created the song for The Exorcist, they actually released the soundtrack about 6 months before the film.
Okay.
And the song charted because people thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, Tubular Bells. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
They thought it was a very intense but uplifting song.
Yeah. Little did they know.
Even the people that created it were not anticipating that response. It wasn't like they were going to be like, oh, we're going to change people's perceptions on things. They're like, oh, it's going to be creepy. And then we're surprised when people are like, oh, that's so beautiful. It's just, oh, it just puts me in the mood for that day. Turns out
the devil's real.
So I would say just because of the association with that film, that song.
I thought just because you're such a Beatles fanatic, you would have picked Helter Skelter in there just because
that was my answer. That was my first answer.
Okay.
So yeah, on the spot it would be Helter Skelter.
Okay, because that's, you know,
the association.
And the association with it. I mean, you know, you had a madman and his cult of 100 people, you know, rampaging California for a number of years. You know, it's not the Beatles' fault, but it's a hell of a song.
Well, I'm with Bono. You know, we took the song back. So
yeah, there you go. I took it back.
Yeah.
Scariest book you've ever read?
Ooh. Scary sequence in a book is Stephen King's what is it? It's not the obvious choice. It's a little known Stephen King book called The Dragon's Eye.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It's I don't know how many fantasy books he wrote, but this was a fantasy book that Stephen King wrote. And there's a sequence where the young prince is going up the stairs being chased by the sort of the antagonist.
Yeah.
And just the way he talks about that sequence of the boy going up the stairs and the antagonist taunting him going up the tower.
Yeah.
I was in school. I was in 8th grade and I was reading this book, and I remember I put the book down to take a breath. And I said, whoa. And there's a kid next to me looking at me reading this book and saw my reaction, and he just looked at me. And I was just like, it's a Stephen King. It's a good book. And he was like, okay. Back to the book.
Yeah.
But I would say as far as like fiction goes, it was that sequence in The Dragon's Eye.
That's good. I'd pick, obviously this is another stuff Stephen King. I'd pick The Stand just because it was so, at the time I read the old version and then I read the revised version. So there's one version from like 78 and there's a revised version from like 90 or so. And some of the segments in the book, they were just randoms. They were random characters that lasted a chapter. Were so visceral, and you could just see it and imagine it. And this is what happens when a pandemic hits. Yeah, you know, society collapses. I mean, we're not talking about this right now. This is a spooky thing, but I mean, the supply chain is starting to get interrupted. Right? We've been talking about this in the news cycle. What's going to happen here? I mean, in 3 months, you know, if we don't have truckers, we don't have things getting unloaded from ports, you know, we have food rotting on the docks. Well, this is happening in The Stand. You know, all these things that he touched upon, you know, they did the show last year, the movie or the TV series, which, you know, it was entertainment, but it didn't really get into the meat and potatoes. I mean, he could have did 30 episodes. They could have been a TV series of The Stand, which would have been amazing. Of just the segments, the one chapter, like the scariest chapter in that book. This young girl, she's afraid of getting assaulted by this roving gang of guys, and you know, she'd been hiding in her attic for weeks, and finally this guy comes up to her porch to check her house, and she just doesn't want to be assaulted, so she takes her dad's old shotgun off the wall and she goes up to the porch to shoot the guy, and it blows up in her face and kills her. And here the guy that came up was just a guy that was trying to help find survivors. So it was one of those random stories in the book that just made you like, there's no hope, you know.
Such a Stephen King.
It's such a Stephen King moment.
Yeah.
So that's the best nonfiction book. Best our best fiction book,
yeah.
best nonfiction, scariest nonfiction story or book you've heard. Like just that you can think of. I got one for you if it takes you a moment to think about it. James Elroy wrote about, I think it's in Crime Wave from about 20 years ago. He wrote a write-up on the murder of Stephanie Gorman, and it's a very sad case because it was never solved. This girl that lived in a neighborhood next to his. James Elroy is a really famous crime writer. This girl got murdered, and it was such a shocking case to the family. There were so many visceral details in it. This is a nonfiction story. And the reason it hit him so much is because he was a student at a high school, just the next high school over, like the next community next door. So everybody knew this girl. It really hit him. He went back and revisited the case, and to this day, it's just another unsolved from the 60s in LA. But the way it's written is so scary because it could happen to anybody. It's a random crime, or maybe it wasn't random. Maybe somebody planned it. And pretty soon you're starting to question in the story. You're right along with him. Like, what happened to this girl? How'd it happen and why? And you worry. It's like, man, could that happen to me or my family? Can something horrible like that happen to somebody? And you're just like, holy cow. Okay. That's another story you have to just read in segments because it gets pretty intense. It's a short story. It's a 20-page story, but it's really well written. Yeah.
Scariest book I've read is probably something Bob Woodward's written on Trump. That was pretty terrifying.
Those ones will take the cake. Definitely. Yeah. How close?
There's, I think he's written 3 of them, and we're not to get political.
No, not at all. But I mean, it's totally fair.
The fact that things and decisions were being made that could affect us, that we're so close.
Well, even then, things and decisions happen that are affecting us now. I mean, absolutely. Decisions that these people did that to this point. I mean, we trust our leaders. As we're kids, as we grow up, we're told to trust the system. And
here we are.
Who's in charge of the system? Are they going to treat us fairly? Are they going to do the right thing? Well, it comes down to money.
Yeah. How about TV shows?
X-Files obviously is kind of at the top. There's a couple other creepy ones from the 90s. I want to say X-Files for sure. Okay, we'll just say that one on top. Yeah. But the spookiest TV movie ever made for me, and it's corny now, but it came out in 1981. It was with a guy named Charles Durning, famous actor. It's called Dark Night of the Scarecrow. And it's on YouTube or any platform you want to find it. I think it's out there for free. It is absolutely crap your pants terrifying. Just, watch it. It's a good one. It's one of those ones I always remember as a kid. Dark Night of the Scarecrow. It's a classic.
Gotcha. I would have said growing up it would have been Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh yeah.
With Robert Stack.
Yep. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep going. I got another one for you. Yeah, keep going.
But in recent times, and when I say like the last 10 years, Paranormal Witness.
Oh yeah.
Seasons 1 through 3.
Yeah.
The first 3 seasons of that show were pure gold. Terrifying episode after episode. The storytelling was so good. They didn't rely on jump cuts. They relied on good storytelling and suspense.
Suspend your disbelief.
Yes. Then they were bought out by a different production company.
Okay.
And seasons 4 through 7 are not worth watching.
Yeah. So there's some that are just that,
bad storytelling and they're relying on
like
jump cuts.
Ghost Hunter, or what's the show with the Baggins guy? I'm not a fan of him at all. Like I've seen a couple of his Zach Baggins? Ghost something. Ghost Trip or Ghost whatever. It's just too dramatic. Like, no, come on. There was a show that came out in the early 90s, and I only watched and I told you about this many times. I've only watched the trailer once. It was on CBS. It was called Haunted Lives. And holy cow, was that, as a 10-year-old kid, scare the hell out of you. One guy came back from the dead. Another lady showed up on TV, and then they had a ghost. And like, this is a true story. The ghost at like the Toys R Us in Sunnyvale, California. Yeah, that was. They had all those stories in there, and it was just like, oh my goodness,
that was on Unsolved Mysteries.
That was on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
It was spooky. It's a spooky show. And looking back now, it's corny. Like you can go back and it's just made for TV production, but
It's storytelling.
it's storytelling, and that's what is so great.
Yeah.
One final one. Your favorite scary story from a relative or friend that you know. I got one. No, we'll close the show with it.
So I'm gonna plug. Hold on here. So I'm gonna plug the podcast again. 5 plain questions.
5 plain questions.
The Christmas the Christmas the Halloween
Jingle bell, jingle bell.
the Halloween episode of 2021.
Okay.
It's
you don't have to give the whole thing away because it's not.
I'm not going to give it away.
Okay, great.
I recommend the listener go after you're done listening to this. Go check out the podcast. It was always the story Gerald Canoyer shared with me about his aunt and uncle in an incident that they experienced out of Pine Ridge. But there's a story that Vanessa Shortpole shared with me on that same episode. It is so I don't know.
There's no words for it. It's
I
just
can't
spooky.
process that story. It's so good.
Wow.
But it's the classic, and this is actually a trope within these experiences. It's a type of devil in the diner type of story, and so they find people that research these things, scary stories, experiences, that there are types of there's similar experiences. Yeah. The tall man experiences, which in the house I grew up in, the tall man. There's the devil in the diner. There is
the deer lady. I mean,
the deer lady.
They just had this on Reservation Dogs. It was kind of it's a comedic point, but no, there's some cultural things, and there's some things that experienced in Native communities that are just
little people.
The little people. I mean, just spirits out there that are spooky.
Yeah, because it's not always the Scooby Doo ghost in the sheets type of thing. You know, there are the hitchhiker.
They're unknown. It's the unknown, and that's so eerie, odd. I don't know, what other adjective do you want? I mean,
yeah. Well, it's it's unresolved experiences that seem to keep coming back to other people. Yeah. So yeah. How about you?
It comes from my dad, and back home in Sisseton, there's a state park, well known. A lot of people know it, Siege Hollow State Park. And little do people know that was once one of our camps. And our camps, going way, way, way back, 200 years, maybe more. We didn't just sit out in the prairie. I mean, tribes went down and they camped in the coulees. That's where there was no wind. That's where you were safe from the elements. And
there's teepee rings behind the house I grew up in.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when the weather got bad, they went south. They traveled south where it was warmer. But those were some of our camps. And this is back in the probably late 30s, early 40s. We had a grandfather live on top of the hill there. Now this is quite a long drive up. This is gravel, and our grandpa Dan's car broke down. And this is the middle of the night. And they grab a can and they're starting to walk, and I think he ran out of gas. And his dad and my father and your uncle, my father and our grandpa was walking. They could hear footsteps behind them. They could hear crunching on gravel. And Dad just, as a little boy, he's like, kept asking, Ate, Dad, what is that? And Grandpa said, nope, don't even acknowledge it. You just keep walking. But Dad would want to look back, and Grandpa would turn his head or just keep, nope. You keep looking forward. You just keep walking. Don't look back there. But Dad could hear it. He could hear that crunch, 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 right? And as he got up there, he knew that there was something back there that our grandfather didn't want him to see or hear. Yeah. About 30 years earlier, around 20-some years earlier, Grandpa was a teenager. He was riding horse. And this is back in the horse and buggy days. He was riding from his dad's place to his other grandpa's place. And all of a sudden, his horse got spooked. Yep. Something tripped that horse. And it took off on him, and he couldn't rein him in. He was trying to rein him in, slow him down. He was afraid of hitting a hole. This horse is racing across the prairie, and he's holding on to this horse. And pretty soon he could hear a braying, and he could hear it braying. And he could hear that bray, that horse just neigh, that neigh. And he looked behind him, and there was a cavalry soldier chasing him. Now, yeah, there's a huge battle up there back 160 years ago.
For context, this incident would have taken place around the 19 teens.
Yeah, 1919, 1920, 1918, somewhere in there, So 100 years ago. But it's stuck with a lot of members of our family. Like they
I've heard this story.
You've heard the story. You've
all
heard
over
the story.
The place. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the story.
Something chased him across the prairie. When he looked back, it's a cavalryman.
Mm-hmm.
Cavalry soldiers chasing him.
Mm-hmm.
So 30 years later, 20-some years later, when he's walking his own son up the hill, there's crunching behind him. And he's like, nope, son, you don't look back. You just keep walking.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty brave guy. So we'll close with this, the scariest moment of our lives, in my life.
Yes.
We're having ceremony, and, this quiet night, and it's a peaceful night, and all of a sudden, we heard a horse.
Where's this at?
This is down behind your dad's place, along the Lake Traverse Hills.
The house I grew up in.
The
infamous house I grew up in.
The house you grew up in.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, we hear this just braying in the distance. I'm like, Joe, is there horses next door? And you're like, that's all brush, man. There's a quarter mile of brush and trees and forest, And I'm like, what is this? Got louder. Pretty soon you hear the thundering of hooves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we just got hit with this blast of wind. And the wind hit so hard it blew the fire out and just was blowing things over, and it just went away. It just kept going through the forest. And that's the moment I knew it was all real. And it's real because you're not the only one that you're not by yourself. You had other people with you. So yeah, there you go. So,
and for myself that lived at the house, that was just another day.
That was another day at the office.
May those things still be happening.
They will. They're going to happen forever. So
good.
I want to thank you for this. It's awesome. It's great to be back on the air. It's great to talk about different things. I mean, pop culture stuff, music, movies, arts, entertainment. Politics is fine. It's real. It's part of reality. We have to live it. You don't have to wallow in it. You just have to talk about it. Yep. That's it. Thank you, man.
It's great having you back on the air.
Thank you.
This is a long time coming. I'm glad that, we were able to get you back on the podcast.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Be able to sort of be a part of you making the decision to come back to the microphone.
Thank you. So hopefully this will be posted, thinking of like a week out. So.
Okay.
All right.
I'll be listening.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Till next time, this is AV's Black Coffee Show, and happy trails. We'll catch you around.